Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Stuessey, Safety Director at Mortenson Construction in our Wind Energy Group. Today, for the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to be talking about preventing severe injuries and fatalities, breaking through a modern-day safety plateau that has been plaguing our industries for more than 25 years. For those 25 years, we have identified and sustained a very steady reduction of recordable incident rates across our industries, starting in 1993 at above 8 and now well under 3 as a TRIR. Unfortunately, and why we're here today, is that while the overall rate of injuries has gone way down, the instances of serious injuries and fatalities, or SIFs, has plateaued and even in some cases increased. The fatality rate in 1993 was just above 5, and today it's only slightly under 4. So if injury rates are steadily decreasing, but the most severe incidents are not, are organizations, workplaces, and workers actually safer? World-renowned safety professionals have been studying this trend to find out why. How do we address it? These studies have found just a few key underlying themes that could possibly upend long-held beliefs about workplace safety management. That reducing injury frequency will not reduce injury severity potential. Injuries of differing severity do not have the same underlying causes. And an over-reliance of lagging safety indicators to influence proactive safety management may in fact be causing us to miss key aspects of preventing the most serious injuries and events in our workforces. Today, we have a small group of industry professionals, from safety to superintendents, wide range of experiences to offer their perspectives on preventing severe injuries and fatalities. So today I want to start off with a very well-known safety program, safety theory throughout there, and that's Heinrich's safety pyramid. I know as a safety professional, I've spent a lot of time not only training the safety pyramid, right, but discussing its theories and training our workforces in how it can affect and bring increased safety outcomes. But with preventing severe injuries and fatalities, some aspects of that safety pyramid may actually be hindering our ability to prevent these serious injuries. Ron, would you like to talk through a little bit about how this may be the case and what we might be able to do about it?
Sure. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, my name is Ron Krebs. I'm the HSEQ manager for Rober Group here in the Americas. And I've been involved in HSEQ management all over the world for the last 30 plus years. I think it's really important to point out that there are basic principles from Heinrich and Bird that we can still use today to actually explain loss and how incidents occur. And it's really helped us to progress where we are now. But what we've done, we've evolved it. We've evolved those principles and be able to understand a little bit more. So I think it's a little bit like anything in society. We learn, we build on it, we add on to it. You know, those first principles, and even if you go into technology, those first inventions were very raw and very, I guess, if you will, it was almost very basic. And I think what happened is we started to learn and we starting to improve upon it. So there was a component of 25, 30 years ago, there was that thought that control the small stuff and I'll look after the big stuff. And I think what we've learned is that we have to prioritize. And just as important, we have to simplify matters. With Heinrich and Bird models, we're still standing on the shoulders of what they built. And we need to acknowledge that those were important aspects or milestones within our evolution. I don't think it'll let us go down the wrong path. I think what happened is the information was there for us to learn on. It just got lost in the flurry of data, investigations, and all this that goes into us improving, and we didn't prioritize. And I think us as human beings, we can only absorb so much. And I think what happened is we just got into this flurry of data and information, and we didn't prioritize. And so risk has to be brought into this equation. The risk, of course, being made up of the idea of probability, frequency and likelihood, excuse me, so that probability, and then the severity. And for the SIFs, for these serious injuries and fatalities, this is where people could be killed or seriously injured. So we have to prioritize our management practices around this type of severity. So I think that it's not a flavor of the month, and I think that's really important to point out. So management of SIFs is not a flavor of the month. It's a critical piece of HSE management that, through careful study and analysis, things that you alluded to earlier, Scott, we've evolved to in our field. We aren't throwing out what previous HSE gurus and pioneers, the likes of Heinrich and Bird, had practiced. We're actually just evolving it. We're building on it, and we're focusing as a result of this. So I think that's where the way I look at those previous studies, it's things we've evolved in, and we wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for those type of studies. But we've come a long ways in understanding that information, what that information gives to us, to be able to actually produce and put forth those best management practices to deal with those priorities.
Thanks, Ron. And when you talk about risk, you know, specifically probability versus severity, why do you think it's so difficult for safety professionals or anyone really to focus on events that might rarely happen, but when they do have outsized impacts? Why is it so difficult?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's this idea that we tend to focus on the things that are always occurring in our company. So we jump on those and try to manage it and try and manage them out. So it's where we decide to spend our time. It's things that we're often encountering. So instead of looking at and saying, okay, these are the big things that could really hurt us, and we have to prioritize that. So it's that usual everyday practices. And so I was going to talk about this a little bit later on, but I'll bring it up now. Is that this idea of building it into how you do your business. So if you're building it into your business just to address those small things, that's what you're going to address, the small things. So you need to put it into how you do things day in, day out, everyday type practices. And I think some of the other folks are going to talk about that a little bit later. But it's so important that you have to think about the what could be and make sure that you prioritize those into your daily practices.
Thanks, Ron. And I can't tell you how many times in the field, boots on the ground, I led my daily safety message with, if we prevent the small things, we then inherently will prevent the large things. So that focus on, you know, the slips, trips, and falls, the minor pinch points, the things that would have never been more than a sprained ankle or a small cut, you know, I feel may have been taking away some of our focus for the larger impact, more impactful hazards out there.
And I think it's really, to add on to that, I think it's really important for all our people within the organization, not just the HSE practitioners and the senior managers, to understand risk and understand what that severity level looks like and get them to really to appreciate that. So that idea of risk education is absolutely vital for everybody within our organizations, to be able to understand that and appreciate that, the what could be's.
You know, I'm a firm believer that preventing safety incidents starts right at the place of work, boots on the ground. And so I'm going to ask John Kakovic, you know, what is it that you do, that you focus on, boots on the ground, you know, every day to prevent these severe injuries and fatalities?
Hi, my name is John Kakovic. Been with Mortenson 11 years now, and in the field for 35 years. Seen a lot of things out there, few bad injuries and that. But the biggest thing that we find now from when I first got started in the field is taking the negativity out of an issue, keeping it positive, coaching and teaching, not just tell somebody, hey, you got to do this because this is a safety rule, but explain to them, why are we doing this? Same thing as we did now with our new helmets that we brought out. We educated the craft in that. People didn't like them. There's some, you know, pushback in that. but they understand why we're doing it. And that happens with all the other stuff we do, is instead of just coming out and saying, hey, you got to do this, and if something goes wrong, being negative about it, as soon as you're negative, the people kind of get their backs up and they don't want to do anything anymore. But be positive with it. A lot of things we do at Mortenson too is we have, when we have an issue, we have line calls with our leadership and that. And, you know, instead of going right back to blaming somebody, we look at what could we have done better? Is there a better tool out there that we could have bought? Is there a better way of doing it? And 9 out of 10 times, we always end up with a better tool or not. Because we're so used to, when I say like 35 years in the field, I'm so used to buying one particular type of knockout set, which is a great knockout set. It's been around for 40, 50 years, but there's a lot of risk to using it, you know, pinch points, hydraulic leaks, the whole 9 yards. And not only did we not look at anything else until we had a person hurt his finger, but then we found a lot more modern stuff now that actually gives you, it's battery powered. It eliminates the hydraulic leak issue, eliminates 2 people, and it's a lot safer to use and a lot lighter to use. And that's the one thing that we try to do in the field here, is just kind of look at new stuff and take the opportunity if something does come up to find a better way of doing it, putting a better process in place. Not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but just, you look at Milwaukee, they have some wicked products out there now that they never had 30, 40 years ago. So that helps a lot with a lot of the, you know, small stuff that we talked about in that. Another big thing is just teaching. And like you said, we do a lot of good things with the small stuff, but it's when we get into the larger stuff, the one-offs. I remember going back when I first started with Mortenson, when we were going to use a helicopter to fly across the river, we must have spent 2 to 3 months with our safety pro, our engineers, our senior leadership to get this plan approved. And it was driving people crazy. Why do we have to go to this detail? But very detail oriented, you know, and everybody was saying, oh, what's going to happen? Nothing's going to go wrong. We do this a million times. And it just happened. The first time we went to use the helicopter to do some tree clearing, it ended up catching on fire, and we almost started a forest fire up in northern Canada. But because we had a plan in place, we worked our plan and we minimized everything. There was a little bit of damage, but not to the extent if we didn't have a plan, which goes right back to my whole thing of communication and teaching. The more we communicate, the more we teach, and keep a positive focus, the more the little stuff goes away, and then people are looking at the bigger stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, John. You know, it can't go without saying the importance of planning, and whether it's task planning, scope planning, project planning, planning at every single level with a focus on preventing those high impact, severe injury, fatality hazards is uniquely important. Alan Nelson, we met, you know, in another lifetime on a wind farm in Texas. What are your thoughts and perspectives on how planning at the place of work plays a role in preventing serious injuries and fatalities?
Yeah, so Alan Nelson, I'm with BayWa Solar Operations and Services Group. Been in renewable energy for 12 years now, since 2010. Started on a construction site, and now I'm on the operations side. So planning is super critical. As a young organization, we just got organized within the last year, and we were able to start off on the right foot. We knowing that eliminating serious injuries and fatalities was paramount to our success. Our managing director got on board early, and we made SIF prevention a cornerstone of our new EHS program and culture. So it wasn't a hard sell. Our managing director had been in the industry for many, many years and was already aware of the SIF concept. And I think that by starting with this mindset, we didn't fall into the traps of outdated thinking. And we didn't have to change the hearts and minds of the employees to look at it from a different perspective, a different lens. we got their buy-in early and we reinforce it often. It's super critical to what we do and how we do it. The planning is, it cannot be overstated how important planning is. And on the backside, we also identify incidents, near misses as a SIF potential, and we bump those incidents up to the manager, the managing director, whereas maybe he may not have gotten that real quick executive summary. So we try to cover it at all stages.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. You'd made mention of, sort of new ways of thinking about safety. And so I want to talk a little bit about that with Cody Davidowski. I know that, in recent conversations, talking about failing safely and capacity, right? All stuff that, safety professionals like us love to talk about. But when it comes to serious injuries, fatalities, where can some of those new ways of thinking about safety play a part?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Cody Davidowski, Senior Safety Director with Mortenson. Been in the clean energy industry for the last 10 plus years, supporting our projects across North America. And so based on that point that you just made, Scott, I think what it really comes down to is creating a culture and maybe a new safety approach where we really focus on learning from potential SIF events. And when a failure occurs, really trying to understand, that presence of capacity, really focusing on, did we have, those redundant controls in place so that if we're relying on, 6, 7 controls to prevent that serious injury or fatality, understanding what controls actually worked, which ones failed, and understanding how we can build some additional resilience in our safety processes so that we can prevent those in order to minimize those impacts and, to your point, fail safely. It's really, again, creating that overall culture from the start, continuously trying to understand and learn from these potential events, and then sharing those learnings across our organization, across the industry. And it really starts here at Mortenson. We utilize our weekly all hands safety calls that really leverage that sharing across the organization with our craft team members as well. And I think that goes back to just the key piece. Learning is the most powerful safety and reliability tool that we have. And it really comes back to John's point that he made earlier, where you really have to focus on the positives and what we can learn from the actual potential events. And it really creates that environment where we have a psychological safe workforce that is really able to open up, bring forth, the facts, understand where we could have performed a little bit better. And it's really, again, going back to creating that overall culture. We're also trying to create a culture that continuously tries to understand variability in our work. And so a lot of times, again, these SIF events are one-off occurrences, but trying to understand where we may have some of that variability in our work in order to be proactive ahead of time and really anticipate those failures from occurring. I think that's the key as well. Traditionally, we've had a traditional safety management program that really focused on reacting, right? And so how can we continue to anticipate some of the variability in our work, continually observe, understand how our work is being performed out in the field and how we can support our craft team members out there as well. And then finally, when we do have a failure, again, it's how we respond to that failure. It's not who failed, but what failed or how it failed, right? Really understanding the process so that we can learn from it and get better. That's the ultimate thing that we're trying to continually instill in our culture. And then finally, from a recognition of hazards, traditionally, when we see SIF events occur across the industry, one stat that we see is traditionally not everyone recognized some of that high energy potential that caused the event. And so within our pre-test plans, our JHAs, we're continuing to leverage those high energy icons in order for our team members to really understand, recognize the different hazards out there so that we can instill, again, that culture of making sure we got the right controls in order to fail safely if that high energy is released. And really, again, understanding that and creating that overall learning culture is the biggest key component, I think, that we need to continue to focus on across the industry.
Thanks, Cody. You know, when we first started, Ron made a very astute point about how, you know, preventing SIFs isn't something additional. It's not an add-on, but an integration of SIF focus and prioritization within our organizational safety management programs. And so, Brad, could you give us a little insight as to what you or your organization may be doing to integrate SIF prevention prioritization into your safety management programs?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Brad Simpson, EHS Director for Invenergy Renewables. Been in the renewable energy industry since about 2009, shortly after a stint in the United States Air Force. I can tell you, we initially started going down this path, looking at SIF-P events back in March of 2021. And I'll tell you, we started by looking at some archived events, reviewed them for SIF-P relevance. We engaged our incident management systems administrator to determine how we could use that system to, I guess, assist or aid us in identifying those SIF-P events, I guess, when we're initially entering into the system. So we wanted to make sure that the incident management system we have in place could kind of facilitate what we wanted to do in identifying the SIF events or SIF-P events and categorizing them accordingly. You know, prior to conducting training with our sites, we discussed with our ops leadership just to make sure that, you know, we're all similarly educated and focused on addressing, you know, what you pointed out, where we're seeing a plateau, or in some cases, an increase of SIFs, where our other metrics were being reduced. And so we just wanted to make sure that that was supported and sustained through our safety observations. And something we do out in the field, it's called safety walks. And that is something where we've got our managers engaged back out in the field. As everybody is aware, coming off of the COVID times, we had a lot of folks, you know, who were not out in the field doing a lot of remote work. We've got our folks back out in the field doing safety walks, engaged with our ops and maintenance teams. And, you know, when we've educated those folks, talked a little bit about the SIFs, the SIF-Ps, where we wanted to readjust our focus as opposed to just, as was mentioned earlier, looking at the strains and sprains, looking at the dropped objects, you know, the things that we were highly focused and attuned to and trying to drive those numbers down. We did that, but then lo and behold, we see that, you know, the numbers for the SIFs are stagnant, flatlining, and in some cases reduced. So, you know, we've adjusted accordingly. We've got all our managers, our leadership in line, and ready to kind of roll on with the ACP program across our fleet.
Thanks, Brad. And, you know, talking about how to classify, if you will, to identify, you know, even near misses or potential events, P-SIFs, and categorize them in a way that an organization can learn from them, right? And kind of separate them out from maybe some of the more minor incidents is uniquely important because, you know, a lot of the studies have tried to put a percentage, right, around, you know, what is the percentage of incidents that may have, you know, a SIF potential. And I've read a couple different white papers that put it around 20 to 22%. And anything that an organization can do to comb through their data, both historical and build in the system to collect it as, events occur, will just increase the learning there. And I'd be remiss not to give a shout out to our ACP data collection team, because when member organizations input their incident data, there is now an actual selection that they can make to identify their incident as a SIF event. And so the ACP is actually actively collecting that information as well. This isn't just a one-time, one-thought issue, preventing SIFs. This is something that all member organizations will be, discussing and working together on, into the future, because there's nothing more important than preventing serious injuries and fatalities for our boots on the ground frontline workers. So with that, there are member organizations that may not be as large as the Invenergies, the Mortensons, right? So what can newer or smaller renewable energy organizations do, to take their first steps on their SIF journey and building in the SIF prioritization into their safety programs? Said another way, what, if we were to choose one aspect of a general safety program, where would one start to make the biggest impact?
I'll take that one, Scott. I think initially you have to train and educate your EHS and your O&M teams. You want to make sure everybody is aware of what we're looking for, right? You talked earlier about the Heinrich Pyramid. We all know the things that feed into that from the bottom up. You take care of the little things to prevent the larger things. I think you have to start with training your folks from a recognition perspective, so they know what metrics to look for, what events to look for, what things within those events that need to be categorized accordingly, so that they know where to focus. And as I mentioned, what we did was check our archived events, right, per the SIF-SIFP criteria, and look for trending. And so that's another place I'd start with, so you know what you're faced with within your organization. And if your incident management system's not configured already, set it up, talk to your system administrator, find out what you need to do to be able to categorize those incidents that you're putting into the system, whether you categorize them as a SIF event or a SIF-P. And then I'll say, to close that out, you prepare your leadership, your management, your O&M teams for those changes. So I'm pulling that from some Balmert safety training, right? Talking about the case for safety and making change happen. I think those are some things, maybe some basic things that you can kind of start to get those things in place.
Thanks,
Scott, if I might add, one of the things we try and do in our organization is relatively small, very small. And one of the things we try and do up front is very much partner with our customers when we're planning out a project, and to talk through those things, to start thinking about the SIFs and how those are going to be addressed throughout the project. So that's something smaller contractors and people and organizations like that can actually do, is start to partner with your customers and have this type of dialogue up front as you're planning out the project. With the individuals, one of the things we've tried to do, and with some success, some limited success, like during an induction, we try and very much introduce our people to these things. And you get, when a new person starts out with an organization, they get swamped with all sorts of information. So one of the things we try and do is, the first thing out of our mouth is to try and talk about these things. Because let's face it, these are the things that are keep our people alive and keep them from suffering a serious injury. So we try and get that bright neon light flashed on it right from the beginning, right from the outset of that induction. And we talk through our golden rules, what we have, or our life-saving rules, and why we put these in place to get that prioritization done. All this information that you're going to get in induction, we try and make sure that bright light is focused on this idea of SIFs, so that we really start to prioritize, and they get in their mind it's something that they have to prioritize as they go about their daily business, whether that's when they go out to the field to get their induction, when they go through their JHAs or JSAs, that this becomes this drumbeat of what we talk about. People talked in this session about the idea of HSC meetings and talking about it in that, and doing your hazard identification type undertakings. So that type of thing is to try and get it from the outset, so people really know, and you spend some time on it, that this indeed is very much a priority.
Yeah, one of the things that not necessarily surprised me, but a major takeaway when I began to shift, my message and my engagement strategy in the field, to bring safety awareness through the lens of SIFs is, the feedback that I would get is often, and I'm going to use a loose quote from a craft team member about 1.5 years ago now, and he said to me, "Finally, a safety professional that is talking first about the things that matter to us." And that struck me and made me reflect of how many times, hey, PPE is important. It is, right? But when our first initiation of that engagement is, hey, wear your gloves, and they may not even be holding material, but the policy says 100% gloves. At the end of the day, shifting that focus or prioritizing, the hazards in the work area that have, the most impact, severity impact, and talking to our craft about that first. It was surprising how quickly they were, that gentleman was able to identify that and really resonated. And so, I'm always encouraging all of our team members, not just our safety folks, to, look through that lens when we're engaging our teams out in the field, helping identify those hazards, identify gaps in the plan, and things of that nature.
Scott, I would add, and I would suspect everybody has a pretty good safety observation, safety suggestion process. I think the antenna are already up as far as the folks looking out for things or precursors, or whatever you want to call them. I think it's an easy integration into your existing programs when we're talking about identifying SIF events or SIF-P on the road to preventing them. I think if you've got a really good safety observation program in place, it's just one extra little block to tick when they see these potentials or an event has occurred. But I think by and large, folks are already out there looking and paying attention. We're just asking them to look and focus on this one other thing. So I think, those programs we've already got in place definitely will make this somewhat of a seamless integration with recognizing the SIFs and the SIF-P events.
And that's, Brad, that's so critical. The idea that if you've got this type of program established, and it's part of how the people in the field do their business, is this type of focus becomes so much easier. Again, you're incorporating it into how people do things on a daily basis, as opposed to this add-on or this flavor, if you will, added on to something. It's just incorporated into how people are working, how they're behaving, how they're doing their business on a day in, day out basis.
And I know at Mortenson, we get a pretty good HazRec program here, with the gifts on the Fridays or whatever and that. But the one thing that I've saw in the last few years that I try to get people to change their mindsets, a lot of people just put them in saying, oh, there's a couple I remember that I can't forget. They saw a snake on the ground, stopped, waited for a snake to pass. Like, yeah, okay, that's a hazard. But then I get them engaged on thinking more of the true hazards that are out there. Not the, oh, there's garbage on the ground, just so I could get a cart in. And what we've found now, especially on the site that I'm on now, they're actually really good. All the cards that come in are actual issues that could have happened or could happen. They're all injuries or some quality issues that we're stopping. It's none of the little, hey, I got garbage. And a lot of that goes back to communicating, retraining. And the one thing that is the most dangerous on any site are the words, I've done this 100 times before, and getting that out of people's mindset. Yeah, I might have worked 100 times or 1,000,000 times, but that one time it's not going to work. So let's do it right. Let's have a plan. Let's communicate and use what we have to the best that we have, not just pencil whipping something. Another thing, when we do our pre-task planning cards, you had a habit of doing them in a vehicle somewhere. And I kind of sat down for a few weeks and I told them, you might as well not even do the HAZREC card. Because if you're going to be sitting up in a lunchroom doing it, it's a waste of time. Point of a HAZREC card is you go outside to where you're going to be working, look around, see what's in the area, see what's changed. You know, is it the weather? Is it, you know, slippery or whatever? See if anything else is in the way, and then do the HAZREC once you did a, you know, a 10-second survey or 15-second survey of what's happening. Because just sitting down and writing the basic stuff, you're going right back to, I've done this 100 times before. And we've noticed that also the HAZRECs are getting good, not the HAZRECs, PTPs are getting good. So yeah, for someone starting out, small companies, none of these things are a huge investment besides 5 or 10 minutes of your time. You know, you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or thousands of dollars buying new equipment. And that is just spending the time to teach the people what to look for, what is good, and what is just pencil whipping. Thanks.
You know, about, gosh, 15 months ago when this group started putting together an awareness campaign to severe injuries and fatality trends, you know, we all agreed real quick that this matter was so deep and complex that we wanted to focus on the start, right? And bringing awareness to the trend among member industries, and offering, you know, the first few steps of what we can do to address this plateauing of severe injuries, fatalities in our workplaces, was the unanimous decision to start. And, you know, this group has put together, you know, 2 incredible trainings. One specifically directed for their audience as the, you know, the organizational management, right? And a training of SIF prevention and awareness for our frontline workers, going through, you know, providing, you know, examples, precursor examples, actual SIF events, and some of those PSIFs and things that we can learn and things that we need to be looking out for. In addition to how do we integrate, you know, SIF prioritization and focus into our existing programs. So that training material, along with posters, as well as links to some of the publicly available research on SIFs and these SIF trends, will be immediately available to all member organizations at cleanpower.org. We will also have Spanish material available as well. So, you know, this is a very, very important topic, one that is incredibly deep and complex. It is a trend that is being observed for, like I said, the past 20 to 25 years, and it will not address or abate overnight. But what we're doing here today, you know, this small group and within our organizations is taking those steps needed to help begin the journey to abate these trends of serious injuries and fatalities, and with the overall hope and perseverance to start bringing them down, along with our overall injuries that we have been seeing over the past 25 years. So I just want to thank all of our participants today on this webinar. I truly hope that some of the information provided today will whet the appetite, so to speak, to begin your journey in understanding the SIF trends. And if you are well knowledgeable and aware, hopefully that this will reinvigorate your desire to keep pushing your organization to identify what they can do to abate these trends for our workforce in the field for our member organizations. Again, thank you everyone for your time today. It was a great discussion.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks,
everyone.
Scott. Important journey.
Absolutely.